The scent of spent oil and clean solvent was my liturgy, the rhythmic clink of spanners against steel my morning prayer. My world, once a blur of high-octane escapes and screaming tires, had distilled itself into this quiet sanctuary, a small auto shop tucked away on a forgotten street. Here, amidst the organized chaos of dismantled engines and grease-stained rags, I found a fragile, hard-won piece. Today, my focus was a sputtering inline-six, its timing belt a frayed whisper of its former self. My fingers, once accustomed to the brutal ballet of a gear stick under duress, now moved with a different kind of precision. I traced the hairline cracks in the worn rubber, each imperfection a tiny betrayal of the engine's intended harmony. The work was intricate, demanding a surgical patience that few understood. I loved it. I thrived on the predictable mechanics, the logical sequence of cause and effect, the absolute certainty that a problem once identified could be fixed. There were no hidden agendas here, no double crosses, just metal and its honest limitations. I slid a fresh belt over the pulleys, my knuckles brushing against the cold block. The tensioner clicked into place with a satisfying thud. My breath, usually held in tight during crucial moments, released in a slow, steady stream. I ran a diagnostic, the scanner humming softly, a reassuring drone in the still air. No errors. The engine, when I finally turned the key, roared to life with a clean, confident purr, a sound far more satisfying than any roar of a crowd or the screech of tires on hot asphalt. The old garage owner, a man whose hands bore the permanent tattoos of decades spent wrestling with stubborn machinery, grunted his approval from his perch on an overturned tire. A nod was all I needed, all I ever sought. My life was a carefully constructed edifice of routine. Mornings began with the meticulous arrangement of my tools, evenings ended with a solitary walk. I lived above the shop, the rumble of passing trucks a lullaby. The walls of my small apartment were bare, devoid of personal mementos, save for a single, faded photograph tucked inside a worn book, a secret kept even from myself. My past was a phantom limb, an ache I learned to ignore, a landscape I had fled and meticulously erased, brick by brick. Every quiet moment was a victory against the clamor of memory. As dusk began to bleed purple into the sky, I locked the heavy steel doors of the garage, the clang echoing down the empty street. The air, crisp and carrying the faint tang of distant salt, drew me towards my nightly ritual. I walked, my pace unhurried, towards the edge of the city, where the urban sprawl dissolved into the gentle lapping of water. The masts, silhouetted against the deepening twilight, rose like skeletal fingers towards the first hesitant stars. Each vessel, from the smallest dinghy to the sleekest cruiser, represented a dream of escape, a journey across open water. I found a perverse comfort here, among the dreams of others, knowing my own escape had been a landlocked, desperate dash for anonymity. The solitude was a balm, a shield against the ghosts that always threatened to stir in the quiet. I closed my eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over me, trying to empty my mind of everything but the present, the here and now. A car door slammed, sharp and out of place, shattering the fragile peace. My eyes snapped open, my body tensing, a reflex honed by years of living on the knife edge. The sound was too close, too deliberate. A sleek, black sedan, a model I recognized from a different life, idled silently at the far end of the dark, its headlights cutting through the gloom like predatory eyes. A figure emerged from the driver's side, moving with a languid grace that was terrifyingly familiar. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken threats. "William!" The voice was a low purr, a serpent's hiss in the quiet night. It was Silas the Serpent Thorne. The name alone was a physical blow, a brutal wrench ripping through the carefully constructed walls of my new life. He stopped a few feet away, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored coat. His eyes, even in the dim light, held the predatory gleam I remembered so vividly, a calculating intelligence that promised only trouble. A poetic choice for a man who ran so fast he left ripples across 3 continents. My throat felt thick, suddenly dry. I kept my face impassive, a mask I'd perfected. "What do I want, Silas?" My voice was a low rasp, barely my own, He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Always straight to the point, William, a trait I always admired. I'm here about an old debt, one that's come due. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken menace. A final job, something only I can do. And if I refuse, his gaze sharpened, boring into mine. Well, let's just say my little sister, the one who thinks I read just a humble mechanic, might find herself in a very unfortunate position. The world tilted. The gentle lapping of the water turned into a roaring tide in my ears. The meticulous order of my life, the quiet peace I had fought so hard to build, shattered into a million sharp fragments. Silas had found me, and he had found her. My sanctuary, my anonymity, my very breath had been an illusion. The past, a coiled viper, had finally struck. The world had indeed tilted, but it did not fall. It merely shifted on its axis, revealing the gaping maw of a past I had painstakingly walled off. The gentle lapping of the water against the hull of Silas's opulent vessel, a sound I had once found soothing, now mimicked the relentless pulse in my temples. We stood on the polished deck, surrounded by the hushed luxury of the yacht marina after dark. The distant city lights a blurred smear against the bruised velvet sky. The cool breeze, carrying the brine and the faint scent of diesel, offered no comfort. "Found him, William," Silas had said, his voice a silken rasp that promised venom. Just as I found I. My throat felt like sandpaper. "Who?" I managed, though the lie tasted like ash. I always knew deep down that the quiet peace I'd built was a house of cards, one strong gust away from collapse. Silas merely smiled, a slow, predatory baring of teeth that never quite reached his eyes. Those eyes, dark and ancient, seemed to drink in my fear like a fine vintage. The mechanic, the ghost, the one who vanished into thin air. I've done well for myself, William. A simple life, clean hands, a quiet garage by the forgotten road. His gaze drifted over the sleek lines of the yachts around us, then back to me, almost convincing. What do I want? The words were torn from me, raw and unadorned. My meticulous order, my anonymity, my very breath had been shattered. A final dance. "William," Silas purred, stepping closer, the faint aroma of expensive cologne and something else, something metallic and sharp, wafting from him. "One last favor. Retired. I know that. I haven't touched a wheel in years, not like that." My voice, despite my effort, held a tremor I despised. Silas chuckled, a low, guttural sound that grated on my nerves. "Retirement is a luxury, my friend, not a right. And for a man with my particular set of skills, foolish indulgence." He paused, letting the implication hang in the night air. "This isn't about speed, William, not just speed. It's about precision, a surgical strike, a ghost in the machine." He began to describe it then, in fragments, painting a terrifying picture. A vault, not steel and concrete, but data. A specific, highly encrypted network, buried deep within a financial institution. The kind of place that believes itself impenetrable, Silas explained, his voice laced with amusement. And their security, William, relies on a very predictable pattern of movement. A series of time transfers, a digital ballet. It needs a driver, yes, but not just any driver. It needs you. The one who can anticipate every shift, every block, every sudden, unexpected swerve in the unseen currents. My mind raced, trying to grasp the impossible scale of it. That's not a car heist, Silas. That's suicide. Even if I could get close, the risk, the layers of defense, it's too complex. I'm not what I once was. My hands, they shake sometimes. I held them out, half expecting to see them tremble to offer physical proof of my decay. They remained steady, a cruel deception. "Nonsense," Silas dismissed with a wave of his hand. "My hands are perfect. My mind sharper than ever, I imagine, from all that quiet contemplation. This is not about brute force. It's about timing, an intricate dance through a needle's eye, as I said. A window of opportunity so narrow, only a master could navigate it. And I was always the master of the impossible." He was trying to flatter me, to appeal to the ghost of the man I used to be. But the words were daggers, twisting the old wounds. "No," I insisted, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a desperate fear for the life I had built. "I won't do it. Find someone else." The air around us seemed to thicken, charged with a sudden, palpable menace. "There are no others, William, not for this. And besides," his gaze sharpened, piercing through my carefully constructed facade. I told you, this is about settling a debt, the one you haven't seen in years, the one who lives quietly in a small apartment above a bakery, a life she believes is safe and unremarkable. The words hit me like a physical blow. The salt tang of the night air, once a balm, now tasted of rust and regret. My estranged sister, Elena. I had left her behind, thinking my absence was her greatest protection. Red ones, I believe, and a cat. A ginger tabby she calls Marmalade. My breath hitched. These were details only someone who had been close to her would know. Not just a name, but the intimate textures of her everyday existence. He hadn't just found her, he had watched her. He had touched the delicate threads of her life. Leave her out of this, I snarled, the mechanic's calm facade crumbling entirely. My fists clenched, the familiar surge of feudal rage igniting within me. She has nothing to do with me. A clean slate untainted by my profession. A fragile thing easily broken. He paused, letting the unspoken threat hang heavy between us, a suffocating shroud. Imagine, William, what might happen to him small garden barks, or her beloved Marmalade, or indeed to her, should I choose to cling to my retirement. The carefully constructed walls of my new life, the quiet solitude, the clean hands, all imploded. The roar in my ears was no longer the tide, but the deafening echo of my past demanding its due. My body, once rigid in defiance, felt suddenly heavy, weighed down by an invisible chain. Her safety, her life. It was a price I could not refuse to pay. The decision, though forced, was made. Tell me what I need, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. The ghost was back, and this time he was driving. The salty tang of the sea air did little to cleanse the bitter taste in my mouth. My boots crunched on the gravel of the yacht marina after dark, each step a reluctant echo of the life I tried so desperately to bury. The moonlight, fractured by the masts of silent vessels, cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe with unspoken threats. I found Silas exactly where I expected him, on the deck of a sleek, obsidian-hulled yacht, its polished surfaces reflecting the distant city lights like scattered jewels. He stood by the railing, a glass of amber liquid glinting in his hand, a predatory calm etched onto his features. William, his voice, a silken rasp, cut through the gentle lapping of the waves. Punctual, a quality I always admired. My gaze swept the deck. This was the crew. Silas gestured with his glass towards the distant skyline, a towering glass edifice piercing the Inkai canvas of the night. Our target, William, the pinnacle of corporate security, a fortress within a city. My eyes narrowed, tracing the lines of the building. It was a new structure, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces, barely a year old. What's inside that's worth this much trouble, Silas? I asked, my voice flat. My experience told me that the more impenetrable a vault, the less likely it held mere currency. Money could be replaced. Silas's smile was a thin, cruel line. Not gold, William, not diamonds. Something far more fragile, far more dangerous. Information. A single, highly encrypted data drive. It holds the keys to kingdoms or the collapse of them, untraceable, invaluable, untouchable until now. My gaze flickered back to the crew. One of them, a gaunt man with eyes that never quite settled, was the demolitions expert, a ghost from my past. Elias. His real name, though I knew better than to speak it aloud. His hands, once steady with explosives, now trembled faintly as he fiddled with a small metallic device. He'd left me in a burning warehouse once, scrambling for my life, while he vanished with his cut. The memory was a fresh sting. Beside him stood a hulking figure, the muscle, his arms crossed over a chest like a granite slab. A new breed of predator, perhaps. Volatile, I sensed, untamed. Then there was the safecracker, a wiry woman whose fingers, I recalled, could dance over tumblers with a magician's grace. She owed Silas a different kind of debt, one that kept her bound tighter than any chain. I knew her history, her desperate compromises. The last member was a young man, barely out of his 20s, hunched over a laptop, fingers flying across the keys. The systems specialist, no doubt. His face was pale, lit by the screen's glow, his brow furrowed in concentration. He seemed too green, too earnest for this den of vipers. A lamb led to slaughter, perhaps, or a wolf in sheep's clothing. I'd seen both. William will be our wheelman, Silas announced, his voice carrying an undeniable authority. And our eyes on the ground. He knows how a machine breathes, how it breaks. He'll find the flaws in their perfect design. My role, the driver, the one who gets them in, gets them out, the one who carries the weight of everyone's escape. My instincts, honed over years of living on the knife edge, screamed betrayal. This wasn't just a heist for Silas. This was a trap, or a test, or both. The target, the crew, the impassable odds, it all felt carefully orchestrated, not just to steal data, but to corner me. The demolitions expert, Elias, cleared his throat. The schematics show a reinforced outer shell, no direct access from the roof without alerting aerial surveillance. Ground floor is a maze of optical sensors. And the vault itself? I asked, my gaze still fixed on the distant building, dissecting its vulnerabilities in my mind. What's protecting the data drive? The safecracker finally spoke, her voice low and raspy. Triple-layered titanium, biometric lurks, seismic sensors, and a pressure-sensitive floor grid around the vault linked directly to central security. The slightest imbalance triggers a full lockdown. I nodded slowly, absorbing the details. It was a formidable challenge, but every system had a weakness, every design a flaw. My mind began to race, not just about the heist, but about my own survival. Silas had brought me back into this world, but he wouldn't be the one to dictate my exit. As the others debated entry points and sensor bypasses, I leaned against the railing, pretending to study the distant building. My fingers, however, subtly traced the worn edges of the yacht's deck. I noted the placement of the emergency flares, the spare fuel cans, the small, accessible toolkit tucked beneath a bench. My eyes scanned the marina itself, the patrol routes of the security guard, the blind spots between the towering hulls, the quickest route to the main road. Silas watched me, a knowing glint in his eyes, as if he could read the calculus unfolding behind my own. He thought he had me cornered. He thought he held all the cards, but he underestimated the quiet mechanic, the man who knew how to strip down an engine to its bare bones and rebuild it stronger, faster, smarter. He had given me a role in his play, but I would write my own ending. The yacht rocked gently beneath my feet, a cradle of conspiracy. I was back in the game, but this time I would be playing a different kind of long game. A game of my own making. Salt-laced air, thick with the scent of diesel and the distant murmur of the sea, clung to me in the yacht marina after dark. Each sleek vessel, a silent leviathan of wealth, barbed gently, their massed lights blinking like cold, indifferent eyes. My breath plumed in the cool night, a ghost of the fire that burned within. Silas had woven his snare, and I, William, was caught, but my mind, a labyrinth of contingency and escape, was already charting paths beyond his reach. Tonight, my role was precision. Bypass the outer layers, disable the primary alarm grid, and create the narrowest window for the others. The target yacht, a 70-foot luxury cruiser named the Siren's Call, loomed at the far end of Pier 7, its polished hull reflecting the sliver of moon. Its security was formidable, a spiderweb of infrared beams and pressure plates, but I had studied the schematics until the lines blurred behind my eyelids. Every system had a weakness, every design a flaw. My fingers, accustomed to the delicate dance of engines, moved with a practiced grace over the cold metal of the junction box. A faint click, then another. The faint hum of the grid subsided, a silent victory. A nod from the enforcer, a silent signal confirming my success. The Siren's Call awaited. My next task was the internal surveillance, a small, almost imperceptible panel near the main gangway. My tool kit, a collection of bespoke implements, felt like an extension of my own bones. The cover popped, revealing a nest of wires. This was the heart, the nerve center. I worked quickly, my gaze sweeping the silent deck, checking the horizon. The night was still, too still. Then the first tremor. Not a sound, but a feeling, a shift in the air. A faint, high-pitched whine that was not part of the marina's usual symphony. My head snapped up. It was too early. The patrol boat, a regular fixture, wasn't due for another 20 minutes. My eyes scanned the water, searching for the telltale green and red lights. Nothing yet, but the whine grew, a growing siren in the distance, closing fast. "We have company," I hissed into my calms, the words tasting like ash. Early, the electronics specialist. His name, a forgotten whisper in the back alleys of my memory, now screamed betrayal. He was supposed to be disabling the other layers, the ones I couldn't reach from the outside. He hadn't. He'd enabled them. Suddenly, a blinding white light erupted from the yacht's deck, bathing the pier in an artificial noon. The siren's call was no longer a silent leviathan. It was a trap, its security systems screaming to life. Alarms blared, a discordant symphony of failure. The heavy-set enforcer, caught flat-footed, stumbled as a flashbang detonated near him, momentarily blinding him. And the electronics specialist, the betrayer, was already scrambling over the yacht's railing, not towards the pier, but towards a smaller, faster boat tethered on the far side, a sleek black dinghy. He moved with a desperate urgency, something small and metallic glinting in his hand as he fumbled to untie the mooring ropes. A glint of recognition sparked in my mind a small, ornate disc, a token I'd seen him fidget with during our briefings, a nervous habit. It wasn't part of our gear. It was his. Adrenaline surged through me, a bitter current. No time for the prize, no time for vengeance, only escape. I saw a chance, a narrow gap between two crates near the water's edge. But as I sprinted, my eyes caught the betrayer's frantic movements. He was struggling with the rope, his face contorted in a snarl of fear and frustration. In his haste, the small metallic disc slipped from his grasp, tumbling end over end, landing with a faint clink on the wet wood of the dock, right in my path. Instinct, honed by years of desperate flight, took over. Without breaking stride, I scooped it up, the cool metal a strange weight in my palm, and plunged into the murky water. Above me, shouts, the crack of a warning shot, the blare of sirens, all fading as I kicked furiously, propelling myself deeper, away from the chaos, away from the light. My lungs burned, but I pushed on, the taste of salt and fear filling my mouth. When I finally surfaced, gasping, I was hidden beneath the shadow of a dilapidated fishing trawler, its hull crusted with barnacles. I was a ghost, an echo of a failed operation, a phantom of the night. The small metallic disc was still clutched in my hand, its surface cool against my skin. It was not the intended prize, not the data chip or the ledger sealers had demanded. It was just a token, no bigger than my thumb, intricately engraved with a series of interlocking geometric patterns, unlike anything I'd ever seen. A strange, almost alien design. What did it mean? Was it a key, a symbol, or just a trinket from a nervous man? I was a wanted man, the heist a catastrophic failure, but this small, unexpected piece of evidence, warm now from the heat of my palm, burned with a silent question, pointing not just to betrayal, but to a deeper, more sinister game. The screech of tires, the cacophony of sirens, the flash of strobes painting the alley in fractured light. These were the last impressions burned into my mind as I fled, a phantom limb of a crew shattered and scattered. My breath tore through my lungs, each gasp a ragged stitch in the fabric of my escape. The thud of my boots on slick pavement was a drumbeat of panic, but beneath it, a colder rhythm began to assert itself, the undeniable cadence of betrayal. The heavy-set enforcer, caught in the flashbang's cruel brilliance, had been a sacrificial lamb. The safecracker, a maestro of tumblers pinned like a specimen, and the electronics specialist, his face, glimpsed in the chaotic strobe light before I plunged into the labyrinthine backstreets, held not fear but a flicker of something else. A smirk. A calculated, venomous satisfaction that curdled my gut more than the threat of capture. He hadn't just failed, he had orchestrated failure. My mind, usually a precision instrument, felt like a shattered kaleidoscope, yet certain shards stood out. The specialist's calms, for instance. A frequency I'd never encountered, humming beneath the standard chatter, subtle as a viper's breath. And the small, stylized serpent etched into the casing of his primary transceiver, a symbol I'd seen before on a ring sealer's war decades ago. It wasn't just a heist gone wrong. It was a meticulously crafted trap, a stage play of ruin. Sealers hadn't wanted the vault's contents. He wanted the vault's witnesses eliminated, and me, William, the ghost of his past, left holding the bloody knife. This wasn't about clearing a debt. It was about burying me under a mountain of new ones. Hours later, the adrenaline had ebbed, replaced by a cold, simmering rage. My body ached, but my mind was sharp, cutting through the fog of exhaustion. a place where fortunes were built and broken, where secrets floated on the tide like forgotten debris. The air hung heavy with the scent of brine and diesel fuel as I navigated the maze of docks. Mastheads swayed against the bruised velvet sky, their lines singing a mournful tune in the breeze. Each luxury vessel, a silent sentinel of wealth, seemed to hold its breath. I found him where he always was, a silhouette hunched over a flickering tablet screen in the galley of a modest, older yacht, tucked away at the farthest pier. He was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of forgotten battles, his eyes like ancient coins. "William," he rasped, without looking up. His voice was gravel over glass. "Thought you were dead, or worse, respectable." "Neither," I replied, my voice a low rumble. "I need information. Sealers." He grunted, his fingers dancing across the screen. "Sealers is always information. What flavor of poison this time?" I pulled out the crude sketch I'd made of the serpent symbol and hummed the specific, unusual frequency I'd overheard. This and the setup. They held a flicker of something akin to pity, or perhaps just recognition of a familiar doom. He tapped a few more keys, then leaned back, a sigh escaping him like steam. "Sealers has been busy, not just with petty theft. He's been consolidating, eliminating loose ends, old rivals, anyone who could challenge his ascension." "Ascension to what?" I pressed, my grip tight on the polished wood of the galley table, gestured vaguely. "Power, not just the usual kind. He's been moving into something cleaner, data, influence. He's building an empire not of muscle but of information. And for that he needs a clean slate. No ghosts, no old debts." My mind raced, connecting the dots. The heist wasn't for the physical gold or diamonds. It was a diversion. A spectacular, public failure designed to draw attention, to eliminate rivals, and most importantly, to frame me, William, the notorious getaway driver, for something far larger, far more intricate. It wasn't just a bank vault, William. It was a data repository. The real prize was the intel on Silas's competition, planted there for the taking, disguised as high-value assets. The specialist. He wasn't there to crack the safe, but to download and transmit, and to trigger the alarm at just the right moment, ensuring you and the others were caught. Silas cleared out his rivals, got his data, left you holding the bag for a string of other unrelated crimes that will be pinned on your crew, market manipulation, and an assassination. A prominent figure, a government contact, who was about to expose Silas's new network, died last night far from your little spectacle. The evidence, carefully placed, points to a crew of high-level operatives led by William. A convenient narrative. Your reputation, William, is being weaponized against you. He wants you not just jailed, but utterly discredited. Erased, and your family, their leverage, of course, to ensure you don't talk, don't fight back. The salt air tasted bitter on my tongue. It wasn't just about money or an old debt. This was personal. Silas wasn't merely a crime boss. He was an architect of ruin, meticulously dismantling lives to build his own twisted empire. He hadn't wanted me to clear a debt. He wanted me to be the final, bloody cornerstone of his new foundation. My hands clenched, the polished wood groaning under my grip. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about vengeance. Silas had awakened a sleeping beast, and now I understood. The hunter had become the hunted, but the prey was about to bite back. My goal shifted, solidified. I would not just escape. I would dismantle everything Silas had built, piece by agonizing piece. The serpent had coiled, but I would be the one to strike its head. The salt air, still clinging to my tongue, was no longer bitter with resignation, but sharp with resolve. Silas, a serpent in human skin, had shown his true scales. He hadn't merely sought to settle a debt. He sought to break me, to watch my world crumble, just as he had done to countless others. He was an architect of ruin, meticulously dismantling lives to build his own twisted empire. Even the most elaborate structures have their foundational cracks. And I, a mechanic of broken things, knew how to find them. My hands, usually stained with grease and oil, now felt an unfamiliar tremor of purpose. The garage, a sanctuary of quiet solitude, transformed into a war room in my mind. The scent of solvent and worn rubber became the sharp tang of strategy. I had spent years burying William the driver, William the shadow. But the man Silas threatened, the man who cared for a loved one, that man was still here, and he knew how to move in the dark. An old burner phone, unearthed from a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard in my workshop, hummed to life. Its contacts were skeletal, remnants of a life I'd tried to shed. One name, however, stood out: the Watchman. He was a man who saw everything, heard everything, and spoke only when the price was right, or the wrong was too great. Hours later, under the bruised indigo sky, I found myself at the edge of the city's underbelly, a place where the concrete gave way to marshland, and the distant hum of traffic faded into the croak of unseen creatures. The rendezvous point was a disused pumping station, its rusted machinery silhouetted against the dim glow of distant streetlights. The air was thick with damp earth and the metallic tang of decay. He was taller than I remembered, his face etched with more lines, his eyes still holding that unsettling stillness. "William," he rasped, his voice a gravelly murmur that seemed to absorb the ambient sounds. "A ghost returned." "Some ghosts never truly leave," I replied, my own voice steady despite the tension that coiled in my gut. "Silas, he's back." The watchman's head tilted, a silent acknowledgement. "He never left, just burrowed deeper. His roots are wide now, William, beyond your old scope." "I need to know his vulnerabilities," I stated, cutting to the chase. "His pressure points, the places where his empire bleeds." He studied me, his gaze unblinking. "You've changed, less fire, more ice." "Necessity," I said simply. "He's threatened my loved one." A flicker of understanding, perhaps even a shadow of sympathy, crossed his face. "Silas has a new venture, a front, shipping, imports, exports, but it's a ledger he keeps close. No one touches it but him. His personal vault, almost. This was the event I needed, a lead. Who handles the numbers?" Silas squeezed him dry, left him with nothing but a ruined name and a taste for vengeance. He's a ghost himself now, living off the grid. But he remembers every digit, every transaction. He remembers the ghost corporations, the shell companies, the phantom shipments. "Can you find him?" He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "For a price. Not coin this time, a service. Silas took something from me, too, something I want back." "Name it," I answered without hesitation. "A specific ledger, a small, leather-bound book. It sits in a safe in his personal office. It contains names, names of those he has. Persuaded. I need that ledger back, undamaged, unread by anyone else." This was the reveal. Silas's methods were not just financial, they were built on blackmail and coercion. This ledger wasn't just a list. It was the foundation of his power, a weapon he wielded against others. This was a vulnerability, but also a new, dangerous target. "Consider it done," I promised, the words tasting like metal on my tongue. The air was heavy with the scent of salt, fiberglass, and expensive wood. Moored vessels, sleek and silent, barbed gently in their slips, their masts scraping against the velvet sky. This was Silas's playground, a testament to his ill-gotten gains. My target wasn't a yacht, not yet. It was a service boat, a humble utility vessel docked at the far end of the marina, near the fuel pumps. According to the watchman, this boat was used for the more discreet transfers of goods that never officially cleared customs. It was a small but vital cog in Silas's illicit shipping operation. The boat's diesel engine hummed faintly, a restless beast tethered to the dock. My tools were simple: a set of lock picks, a small endoscopic camera, and a data stick. My aim was not destruction, but observation. I needed to see how the system worked, to understand its rhythm. The cabin door yielded with a soft click. Inside, the air was stale, smelling of old coffee and diesel. I moved with practiced efficiency, my fingers dancing over the control panel. The endoscopic camera snaked its way into the wiring, a tiny eye seeking out the vessel's communication and navigation logs. I downloaded a week's worth of data onto the stick: routes, coordinates, communication frequencies, and most importantly, the names of frequent contact vessels. As I extracted the data stick, a small laminated manifest caught my eye, tucked beneath a worn clipboard. It wasn't the main ledger, but a daily log for special cargo. One entry, dated just 2 days prior, showed a delivery to Pier 17 Thorne Industries, a name I hadn't heard in years. It was an old holding company, long thought dormant. This was another clue. a thread leading deeper into Silas's resurrected empire. I replaced everything exactly as I found it, leaving no trace of my intrusion. The cold wind bit at my exposed skin as I emerged from the boat, the rhythmic slap of water against hulls a mournful drumbeat. The data stick, warm against my palm, held the first small fracture in Silas's facade. This was only the beginning. The serpent would coil, but I was ready to strike at its heart. The game had truly begun, and this time I wasn't driving the getaway car. I was laying the traps. The air hung thick with the promise of rain, a metallic scent on the wind as I moved. My promise to Silas, "Consider it done," echoed, but its meaning was a blade honed for his own throat. The ledger, a web of his making, was now the very thread I would unravel. My counterplan, conceived in the quiet desperation of my garage, was a delicate clockwork of diversions and precise timings, each gear meshing with a memory of the life I'd buried. My first move was subtle, a whisper sent through the city's undercurrents, designed to stir the nest without revealing the hand that poked it. A cryptic message, left where it would be found by one of Silas's less disciplined associates, hinted at a rival crew making a play for a shipment of his illicit goods. It was a phantom scent, meant to draw the hounds away from the true quarry, me. Within the hour, the city began to hum with a different kind of energy. I felt it, a familiar tremor in the asphalt beneath my boots, a distant wail of sirens that wasn't for me, not yet. My old instincts, long dormant beneath layers of grease and quiet contentment, flared. The world narrowed to the hum of my engine, the feel of the steering wheel, the map of escape routes etched into my mind. I drove my modified sedan, a wolf in sheep's clothing, through the labyrinthine streets, a ghost in the urban twilight. The vehicle was a testament to years spent perfecting my craft, an anonymous shell housing a beast beneath the hood, its suspension lowered, its engine a purring predator. The first confrontation came swiftly. A dark SUV, one of Silas's enforcement vehicles, peeled from a side street, its intention clear. They were not fooled entirely, or perhaps my diversion had merely bought me time. "So, the mechanic remembers how to dance," I muttered, pressing down. The engine roared, a guttural answer to the challenge. I swerved, a ballet of controlled chaos weaving through slow-moving traffic. The SUV tried to cut me off, but I anticipated the move, sliding into a gap that barely existed. Mirrors flashed, metal shrieked, but I was through, leaving the enforcers snarling in my wake. This was no mere chase. It was a desperate ballet, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse played on the city's arteries. My hands moved with a forgotten grace, shifting gears, feathering the brake, each action a brushstroke in a masterpiece of evasion. I recalled the feeling, the adrenaline that once defined my existence, now resurrected for a final, desperate act. I cut through an alleyway, scattering overflowing bins, then burst back onto a main thoroughfare, momentarily losing the trailing vehicle. The air grew cooler as I approached the water, the scent of salt and diesel replacing the city's exhaust. The marina was a silent, opulent graveyard of white vessels, their masts reaching like skeletal fingers towards the bruised sky. My engine idled, a low, thrumming pulse as I surveyed the scene. Silas's yacht, the Serpent's Kiss, stood sentinel, its lights gleaming, a beacon of his power. Two figures, Silas's bodyguards, stood at the gangway, their postures rigid. This wasn't a stealth mission. It was a head-on collision. My plan was simple. Create enough chaos to draw Silas out, then confront him directly. A sudden, sharp crack rent the quiet night. A pre-planted incendiary device, carefully positioned near a row of smaller fishing boats at the far end of the marina, ignited. Flames licked upwards, painting the water in angry oranges and reds. Sirens, now closer, began to wail in the distance. The bodyguards at the gangway hesitated, then one rushed towards the disturbance. The other, however, remained, his eyes scanning the periphery. This was my window. I moved, a blur of motion, across the concrete. My old friend, the heavy wrench, clutched in my hand. The bodyguard turned, alerted by some shift in the air, but it was too late. I boarded the Serpent's Kiss. I moved through it, my footsteps muffled by thick carpet, the scent of expensive cigars clinging to the air. I found Silas in the main salon, a crystal tumbler in his hand, his eyes fixed on the distant blaze. He wore a silk robe, an emperor observing his burning city. He turned slowly, a predatory smile playing on his lips. "William, I knew you couldn't resist the flames. A moth to the light, always." "You underestimated me, Silas." I responded, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "You thought you could just pull me back into your game. And haven't I?" He gestured around the luxurious cabin. "Here you are, on my yacht, doing my bidding." "No," I countered, stepping closer. "I'm here to finish it. The ledger, Silas. It's what you hold over everyone, isn't it? My power is absolute." "Not anymore." I pulled a small, encrypted data stick from my pocket. "This contains a digital copy of that ledger, Silas. Every name, every debt, every dirty secret. It's already on its way to a dozen different authorities, set to release if I don't check in by a certain time." His face hardened. "A bluff. You wouldn't risk your loved one." "That's where you're wrong," I added, my gaze unwavering. "I'm willing to risk everything to protect her, and for her I've already made the impossible choice. You can have your power or you can have her, but you can't have both." He stared at me, his mind calculating, weighing. The flames outside cast an orange glow through the windows, reflecting in his eyes. "What do you want, William?" "I want the debt cleared, forever, and I want the original ledger in your safe destroyed. Then you walk away from her and from me and from everything you've touched." Silas scoffed. "You think you can dictate terms to me?" "I'm not dictating, Silas. I'm offering you a choice, your empire or your life. Because if this data goes public, every enemy you've ever made will come for you. And if you try to harm her, I will personally ensure that this data, and every other secret I know, finds its way to the darkest corners of the world." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, a chorus of consequence. Silas's eyes narrowed, searching mine for any sign of weakness, any hint of a lie. But there was none. My resolve, forged in the quiet despair of my past, was absolute. I had come too far, sacrificed too much of my peace to falter now. "You've learned to play a dangerous game. William," he finally conceded, his voice a low growl. "A game you're ill-equipped to win in the long run." "Perhaps," I answered, a bitter taste in my mouth, "but I only need to win this one hand." He finally gave a curt nod, a grudging acknowledgement of the trap I had sprung. "The ledger is in the safe behind the painting. The combination is." He rattled off a series of numbers, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance. I moved to the painting, my heart a dull drum against my ribs. My hands, calloused from years of wrenching and tightening, worked the dial. The safe clicked open, revealing a leather-bound book. This was it, the heart of his empire. I had won, yes, but the victory felt heavy, stained with the grim knowledge of what I was still capable of. I pulled the ledger out, its pages thick with names, with lives. Silas watched me, his expression unreadable. I held the book over a nearby ashtray, where a half-smoked cigar still smoldered. Without a word, I ignited the first page. The flame caught, greedy and bright, consuming the lies, the debts, the power. As the paper curled and blackened, so too did a part of my past, burning away in the shimmering heat. The smoke rose, carrying with it the ghosts of a life I could finally begin to leave behind. My fingers, once so adept at the intricate dance of a steering wheel under pressure, now fumbled with the cold metal of the safe dial. Each click was a tiny tremor in the silence, a brittle sound that seemed to echo the shattered arrogance in Silas's eyes. He watched me from the floor, a broken puppet, his empire crumbling around him with the revelation of those numbers. The painting, a grotesque portrait of a forgotten landscape, swung inward, revealing the dark maw of the safe. Inside, nestled amongst dull papers, lay the ledger. Its cover, a plain, unassuming leather, belied the venomous secrets it held, the names and figures that could unravel an entire web of illicit enterprise. I pulled it free, the weight of it a sudden anchor in my hand. My movements were stiff, each step a protest from weary muscles, but a current of grim satisfaction propelled me forward. I had faced the beast, not with a weapon of steel, but with the sharp edge of his own greed. The city, usually a symphony of ceaseless activity, felt muted, as if holding its breath. I parked the familiar pickup truck amidst the sleek, silent vessels, their masts reaching like skeletal fingers towards the bruised indigo sky. The air here was sharp with salt and the faint scent of diesel, a cleaner, more honest aroma than the perfume of deceit I had just left behind. I walked the creaking planks of the dark, the ledger clutched tight beneath my jacket. Each boat, a testament to someone else's ambition or escape, barbed gently, their ropes groaning softly in the breeze. My gaze drifted across the water, where the distant city lights shimmered, fractured and distorted. It felt like looking at a reflection of my own life, a fractured image, slowly piecing itself back together. My first call was to her, the one whose safety had been the compass guiding my desperate course. His voice, soft and sleepy, was a balm, a melody that quieted the discordant notes of my recent past. "I'm safe, William," he murmured. "Everything is fine." Those words, simple and profound, were the true treasure I had sought. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound relief washing over me, so potent it threatened to buckle my knees. I had done it. But the ledger, a heavy presence against my ribs, was not merely a trophy of victory. It was a burden, a responsibility. It held the names, the dates, the intricate tapestry of Silas's dealings. It was the key, not just to his downfall, but to the freedom of countless others caught in his cruel orbit. The question now was what to do with it. Handing it over to the authorities, the men in uniforms who had always been a distant, often adversarial, presence in my life, felt like a necessary evil. It meant stepping into the light, exposing myself, but it was the only way to truly dismantle the structure Silas had built. I was no longer the man who had driven away from that ruined heist, scarred and broken. The mechanic, meticulously rebuilding engines, had been a shell, a carefully constructed illusion. The man sitting here now, with the weight of a criminal empire's secrets in his hand, was something else entirely. He was a survivor, yes, but also a warrior, forged in the fires of necessity and love. The scars remained, etched not just on my skin but deeper, into the very fabric of my being. But they no longer defined me. They were the crucible through which I had passed, emerging tempered, not shattered. I thought of the quiet life I had built, the grease under my fingernails, the honest sweat on my brow. Could I return to it, knowing what I knew, having done what I had done? The answer came with the gentle lapping of water against the hulls. No, I could not simply close my eyes again. A choice crystallized in the quiet hum of the night. My path would be one of quiet vigilance. The ledger would be delivered, yes, and with it my story stripped bare of embellishment. I would accept the consequences, whatever they might be. My hands, once trained for flight, now knew the strength of holding firm. I would be a quiet guardian, a silent observer, a man who understood the mechanics of both engines and deceit. The past was faced, the debt paid, and the future, though uncertain, was finally, truly my own. I rose from the bench, the ledger still firm in my grip, and walked towards the distant promise of dawn.